Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
A breakdown occurring in the cylinder head gasket, or simply the cylinder head, does not lead to anything good. This is an unpleasant phenomenon for any car owner. Damage to this element immediately negatively affects the operation of the heating system. The engine overheats, smoke begins to waft. From under the hood, emulsion appears in the engine oil. If a motorist encounters at least one of these signs, the first thing to check is the condition of the cylinder head gasket or seal. There are different causes and signs of a punctured gasket, which require appropriate action on the part of the vehicle owner. The motorist can learn to determine the presence of problems in this node. He must also know how to act in such a situation. What is a gasket? Before talking about the causes of why the cylinder head gasket suddenly punctured, you need to understand the essence of this element. After all, it seems to many that this is an ordinary seal, which should not play a key role in the performance of the engine and its systems. In practice, this is not the case, because the gasket is of great importance in the design of the motor. An internal combustion engine has two key components in its design. This is the block, where the cylinders are located, as well as the head of the block itself, better known as the cylinder head. That is, we are talking about two components of the engine, which are connected to each other by fasteners, and to ensure tightness, the same gasket is used. The main task of the gasket is to ensure sealing of the combustion chambers and all internal passages required. If it is punctured for one reason or another, it leads to malfunctions of the power unit. When producing gaskets, manufacturers use thin sheet metal or reinforced paranite, which has additional metal trim directly under the combustion chambers. The walls between some of the existing holes in the product are extremely thin, and if you incorrectly install the element, it will quickly burn through. In order for the gasket to serve as long and efficiently as possible, it is important to ensure a perfect fit between the surfaces of the block and the head. Here it is required to ensure perfect cleanliness, the absence of any roughness and irregularities. Another important condition for longevity is the correct tightening of mounting bolts, which is carried out in a strictly defined sequence and with a clearly controlled tightening torque. For this purpose, car makers necessarily enclose an instruction manual with a detailed diagram and description of tightening torques. When performing repair and restoration work that involves disconnecting the head and block, causes of malfunction. Having defined the concept and meaning of the element, it is now necessary to understand why the cylinder head gasket can burn through. Despite the variety of possible causes, most often this happens due to the most common overheating when the engine temperature rises above the permissible values. The overheating itself can occur under the influence of various factors. When the engine overheats, the cover is a little lead, thereby breaking the plane of adhesion and contact between the two elements through the gasket. The result does not wait long, and depressurization with dangerous consequences occurs. Practice and experience of calls to car services clearly shows that the change in geometry mainly concerns heads made of aluminum. Cast iron analogs do not encounter this. In the case of cast iron, there is a higher probability of overheating crack formation than warping. Overheating can also cause the gasket itself to heat up to extreme temperatures, which leads to changes in the structure and geometry of the product. This also results in a depressurization process. This can occur in machines where iron asbestos gaskets are used. In addition to burnout, there are other reasons why the cylinder head gasket may be punctured. Here the fault lies mainly on the masters who violate the rules of tightening, do not follow the established rules, and do not use the torques specified in the instructions. Moreover, over-tightening and under-tightening can lead to negative consequences. If the gasket is over-tightened, it will simply collapse. This often happens when using gaskets made of low-quality materials. If the gasket is not fully tightened, exhaust gases will start to escape, i.e., the gasket will not provide full sealing. Initially, the gas may come out in small and imperceptible portions. But when interacting with air, the material of the seal will start to wear out, which will eventually lead to more obvious signs. Still, The most obvious causes of failure include the inherently poor quality of the gasket. Some manufacturers use raw materials that do not perform well. Not always the head can withstand even the warranty period. To avoid such troubles with your engine, try to use only high-quality products. Moreover, the brand does not play a key role here, as fakes under the names of well-known companies are actively distributed on the market. It is better to contact specialized and certified stores. We cannot exclude such a simple reason as wear and tear. This is a consumable that has a limited service life. If the machine is old and the engine gradually loses its efficiency, there is a probability of burning or puncturing the gasket. It will need to be replaced, strictly observing the regulations, sequence, and tightening torque. Characteristic signs. Also, the car owner must necessarily need to familiarize himself with the signs of a burned-out cylinder head gasket. This will allow you to diagnose the malfunction in time and take appropriate measures to eliminate it. There are various symptoms that indicate that the cylinder head gasket in your engine is punctured. Appearance of any of them is a reason to go to a car service or try to cope with the task on your own. If you have a torque wrench and tightening scheme regulated by the manufacturer, replacement can be done with your own hands. But here, everyone decides what is the best way to do it. Based on all of the above, it can be noted that the task of the cylinder head gasket is to seal the block, as well as to protect against the penetration of gases from the working cylinders into the engine compartment and against the mixing of the fluids used, fuel, oil, and antifreeze, among themselves. Pay close attention to characteristic symptoms. They will tell you that there is a problem in the cylinder head area. The gasket has burned through or has been punctured. Exhaust gas is coming out from under the gasket. The most obvious and easily diagnosed symptom. When the integrity of the gasket is broken, exhaust comes out through it, ending up in the underhood space. It is difficult to visually notice such a sign. Plus, the exhaust will be accompanied by a loud sound. But with a minor depressurization, such a symptom remains unnoticed for a long time. Shooting, arising between the working cylinders. In part, this resembles the situation with a powertrain Trojan. The fuel air mixture from one cylinder mixes with the exhaust in the other cylinder. With such a malfunction, it can be difficult to start the engine, although after warming up everything is normalized. Determine the presence of the problem by measuring the compression in the cylinders. If a breakdown is present, then the compression values in different cylinders will be significantly different. The exhaust enters the antifreeze. When the gasket is punctured, gases can enter the engine cooling system in small portions from the block housing. Here it is recommended to unscrew the radiator cap or the cap on the expansion tank. If a large amount of gases has leaked, you will see an active bubbling process. With a small volume, bubbling becomes not so noticeable. Here, balloons, bags, and condoms come to the aid of motorists. Penetration of cooling fluid into the cylinder. This is possible if a rupture occurs in the area between the combustion chamber and the cooling system jacket channel. Diagnose the malfunction usually manages due to the release of white smoke through the exhaust pipe. In parallel, the level of cooling liquid in the expansion tank begins to decrease. The more coolant penetrates into the cylinders, the wider the smoke will be. Oil leakage. Through the gasket, engine oil can also begin to flow outward. This is one of the signs of gasket burnout, when the outer shell tears. Determine the fault is quite easy, since traces of oil will appear in the area of the junction of the block and the head. Although here the cause lies not only in this. The motor temperature rises quickly and to high values. This is due to the penetration of hot exhaust into the cooling system, which can no longer cope with such thermal loads. In parallel with the replacement of the cylinder head gasket, the cooling system is necessarily flushed. The coolant and oil are mixed. Here there is a slightly different situation when tow-sol or antifreeze gets into the engine compartment and mixes with oil. Such a malfunction has an extremely negative effect on the condition of the motor, which is due to the loss of oil of its lubricating properties. Whereas significantly accelerated, the engine can quickly fail. The problem can be detected due to the appearance of oil stains when opening the expansion tank. The motorist is advised to unscrew the cap on the oil filler neck and look at its inner surface. If there is an emulsion with an orange tint, the coolant has definitely got into the lubricant. The same emulsion can be found on the oil dipstick. Weak operation of the heater. When the gasket burns out, exhaust gas enters the cooling system jacket. This contributes to the active inflating of the heat exchanger heater radiator. Thus, the efficiency of its work falls. At the same time, there may be sharp spikes in the antifreeze temperature. Pressure builds up in the radiator connections. If the sealing of the block and head is broken, the exhaust follows the cooling system, penetrating through the radiator connections. They may become hard to the touch. It is easy to check this by simply squeezing the pipe with your hand. The spark plugs become fouled, or they become wet, because the cylinders are in the cooling liquid, consisting mainly of water. Read also, hardness or softness of the brake pedal. A reason to be wary. An obvious sign that the engine has overheated is the appearance of condensation on the surface. This is an indirect symptom of a burned gasket or a crack in the block. Having familiarized yourself with all the possible signs of a burned-out cylinder head gasket on the engine, you should learn about the methods of diagnosing the malfunction, which are sometimes easy to apply with your own hands. Diagnostic methods. When detecting direct or indirect signs, a new task arises before the car owner. He needs to understand how to check the cylinder head gasket for breakdown. There are several methods in total. Moreover, the diagnostics is quite simple and can be applied in a garage. Experience does not play a key role here, since the task will be handled by novice motorists. If you are interested and need to know how to check whether the cylinder head gasket was punctured on the car engine, perform the following manipulations. Any of the presented methods is suitable for obtaining an accurate answer regarding the integrity and current state of the gasket. Between the block and the head. Visual inspection. The simplest option, how to determine on your own that the engine is punctured or worn out the cylinder head gasket. Here there is no definite and strict algorithm of actions. The malfunction is determined simply by visual observation. First you need to start the engine, open the hood, and look closely at the connection area of the block and the head. If even a small amount of smoke comes out through the slots, there is a problem. You can also listen to the behavior of the motor, which may begin to produce uncharacteristic ringing sounds. Check radiator and expansion tank with coolant. It is also obligatory to check the neck with which new engine oil is poured in as part of the scheduled maintenance. The method is also visual. Just unscrew all the covers and look at them carefully. Do not forget to look inside the tank. If the cooling liquid has penetrated into the motor, on the oil filler cap, you will see a characteristic red emulsion. If the oil is in the antifreeze, then oily stains will appear on the radiator cap or the expansion tank. Observation of the exhaust pipe. Start the engine. You can ask a helper to rev the engine a little to increase the volume of smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe. If you see white-colored smoke coming out that is actually vapor, there is probably a problem with a punctured gasket. With antifreeze, white-colored smoke with a distinctive sweet tinge usually comes out through the pipe. Additionally, look into the expansion tank with the coolant. If the level gradually drops, then you have probably diagnosed a gasket breakdown. Although the sign is considered indirect, check for exhaust in the cooling system. To do this, you can use one of two methods. The first method involves unscrewing the cap on the radiator or expansion tank. If there is active bubbling inside, this is a bad sign. The second method is to use a balloon or an ordinary condom. The product is stretched over the neck of the tank, removing the cap beforehand. Then the engine is started at a speed of about 3,000 to 5,000 per minute. If the balloon or condom inflates, quickly or slowly, depressurization has occurred. That is, the gasket will soon need to be replaced. Read also, all about changing the brake fluid in the car. All methods have been used for decades, but continue to be effective, simple, and quite accurate. Yes, you can spend extra money and go to an auto service for diagnostics. But in order to save money, it is better to determine the malfunction yourself, and then entrust the replacement to the masters, or do everything with your own hands. Self-replacement of the gasket is potentially complex and difficult to perform without the appropriate experience and special tools. Also, do not trust garage workshops that do not have a license. It is better to spend more money, but give the car in safe hands to specialists who will provide guarantees for the work performed. What to do in case of depressurization. Regardless of how badly the seal has been damaged, there is always only one scenario to follow. Inexperienced motorists often wonder whether it is possible to drive a car with a punctured, even if not severely, cylinder head gasket. And what will happen to the cylinder if you continue to operate? Some will say that I drove quietly last time and will be able to continue the trip without replacement and taking any emergency measures. But in reality, you won't be able to ride very far. If you don't stop the depressurization process in time, it will have disastrous consequences for the vehicle. The gasket will completely burn out, mixing of working fluids, problems with cooling, exhaust, etc. will begin. The result can be complete engine failure, which is not always recoverable, even if overhaul is taken into account. That is, you can drive if you see a faint manifestation of the first signs of a punctured seal. But you should drive to a garage or the nearest car service center, where you will be helped to solve the problem. A punctured or burned gasket only means that it needs to be replaced. The procedure involves several procedures. To begin with, all assemblies and elements of the underhood space are removed, connected to the engine and interfering with access to the blockhead. Then the bolts are unscrewed. In most cases, the old bolts are no longer suitable for further use. In addition to the gasket, you will have to buy a set of new bolts. If the plane of the head is broken, work is carried out to grind the surface. Here you cannot do without special machines, which are unlikely to have an ordinary car owner in the garage. A new gasket is necessarily purchased taking into account the thickness of the layer of metal was removed in the process of grinding. The head and block are cleaned of all accumulated soot at the junction with the gasket. All traces of the old gasket are carefully removed. There is still to be a complete revision of all surfaces. The task of the car owner or the master who conducts the revision is to detect gaps. They may be present, but should not exceed 0.5 to 1 millimeter. If there are gaps on the head, it will be necessary to grind it or buy a new cylinder head. It is recommended that a layer of graphite-type grease be applied to the mating surfaces during the replacement process. This will give the seal additional softness and allow it to better assume its optimum position on the surface. When all replacement measures have been completed for several weeks or hundreds of kilometers, it is extremely important to monitor the performance of the power unit. Do not overload it, and watch for possible signs of wear already with the new seal. Do not overload the engine immediately after changing the gasket. Allow it to run under light to medium load. In this way, the gasket will fully fit into place and guarantee the desired level of tightness. A big role is played by the quality of the product initially, and whether you followed the rules of tightening, which are provided by the manufacturer and necessarily included in the manual. Deviation from these norms does not guarantee a good result. You can waste money, time, and effort. Choice of gasket. In conclusion, it is worth touching on the choice of a suitable cylinder head gasket. They are made on the basis of metal and vaporite. Therefore, it is natural that motorists are interested in which of the presented materials is better and what is worth using. Each type of gasket has its own strengths and weaknesses. When choosing one, you should be guided by the recommendations of your automobile manufacturer. If the manual says that it is metal or paranite products that should be used, it is absolutely impossible to act contrary to the recommendations. Metal seals have increased strength compared to their competitor. They are usually installed on motors with increased power and when using a turbocharger. If your car has average power indicators and you operate it without excessive load, paranite will perfectly cope with the tasks. At the same time, the quality of the product and the correctness of its installation play a big role. It is better to buy gaskets from trusted manufacturers through certified sellers to avoid buying a fake. Then it is just as important to install the product correctly. When the gasket is uneven, it will quickly burn through, no matter how strong the material was originally. In situations where the head gasket is punctured on the car and the driver observes the corresponding signs, it is not possible to continue a long trip. In theory, you can get to your destination, but by that time the engine will be so badly damaged that, at best, expensive or major repairs will be required. When you notice the first signs, be sure to head to the garage or car service center. It is important not just to detect the fact of gasket damage, but also to understand the reason why it happened. In conclusion, understanding the reasons behind a punctured cylinder head gasket is crucial for maintaining your vehicle's performance. Common causes include overheating, improper installation, and wear over time. To determine if your gasket is compromised, keep an eye out for symptoms such as coolant leaks, engine overheating, or white smoke from the exhaust. If you suspect a problem, it's essential to address it promptly to avoid further damage. Regular maintenance and timely inspections can help prevent issues before they escalate. Remember, when it comes to your engine, prevention is always better than cure. Thank you for watching, and drive safely.